which would be the Pancreas summary by Dr. Cinthia Drachenberg from University of Maryland, Baltimore.
Thank you. So we had a very good session, probably one of the best since we started having these pancreas sessions in the Banff conference. We divided the session in 3 parts. The first part was continue to deal with the duodenal calf biopsy and the biopsies and development of the Banff schema. Second part, advances in the diagnosis of pancreas rejection. And the third part was islet dysfunction after beta cell replacement. Regarding the first part, we engaged 2 lecturers to give us an introduction to have a formal introduction to the features of intestinal rejection, since we are continuing to this effort to develop the guidelines for interpretation of duodenal pancreas segment biopsies. So Marta Minervini from UPMC gave a very nice lecture explaining the features of T-cell mediated rejection, and Marion Raband from Necker talked about antibody mediated rejection, and this is a newer and with significant advances part of intestinal transplantation. Dani Hollanda presented the update of what she has been doing with the retrospectively collected samples that she's comparing, to have a practical view of what actually do we see in these samples as we move ahead with the features. And she has 37 concurrent samples of duodenum and pancreas that essentially were there randomly, the presence of both tissues when the pancreas biopsy was done, and pancreatectomies that have generous amounts of both components. And when rejection is considered, starting from mild rejection and more severe grades of rejection, the duodenum was a relatively good surrogate marker with a positive predictive value and sensitivity of 100% for pancreas rejection, and negative predictive value of approximately 75% and specificity 74%. Now, that we have been dealing with this since the 2013 Banff session, because the first paper proposing the duodenal calf as a element that can be used for surveillance of pancreas biopsies was published in 2012 by the Innsbruck group, Margaret Christian, and he came and gave us a presentation in 2013. But this is catching speed, and in the last few months, actually there were 2 new papers discussing the potential use of these biopsies, this duodenal component of the pancreas transplant. Interestingly, one of the papers said there is no use of using the duodenal biopsies, and the other said yes, they are very useful. So it becomes more interesting for us to deal with this topic. So we invited both groups to present in our session. Unfortunately, only Christoph Griff from Oslo could come, and he gave us a very nice presentation showing us their findings and why they thought that the duodenal segment was not useful. And unfortunately, Gunther Brockman didn't make it. It would have been nice to listen to the other part of the equation, and of course we have a very nice paper look at and try to make up our minds and try to get the best out of this controversy. The second part of the session was the advances in the diagnosis of pancreas rejection, and this was really exciting because we had two presentations for the first time on molecular studies. And Candice Rufus from Imperial College did nanostring studies on 52 pancreas biopsies, and she covered a broad spectrum of the rejection pathologies and normal tissue, but particularly looking for correlation with antibody-mediated rejection. And this is the first time that this is done, and she used the kidney and heart gene panel to make some correlations, and she found that the molecular AMR transcript score is associated with antibody-mediated rejection, and that it has really potential to improve prediction in pancreas biopsies. And this is really groundbreaking study that should stimulate further exploration to try to apply this technique. As you know, the pancreas biopsies are much fewer than all the other biopsies we have had, probably with the exception of the composite tissue allograft. So it's a big achievement to be able to do molecular studies in these scanty biopsies. And equally excited, we were with the presentation of Surya session from Weill Cornell, that she applied messenger RNA and microRNA transcriptome profiling to 10 pancreas biopsies. This is also a pilot beginning study, and their group have published significant data on the kidney with this technique and in urine samples. And she was very happy to find that from her samples she could actually retrieve high quality material for the RNA studies. She also managed to demonstrate in these few biopsies that she started doing the work a differential gene expression between normal biopsies and T-cell-mediated rejection, and also showed us a heat map to show us the overlapping features between kidney and pancreas rejection. So both of these very exciting presentations. Further on, we moved to some more clinical aspects, and Pablo Uva from Buenos Aires presented lessons from concurrent pancreas and kidney biopsies, and he presented various different settings with 158, and I think I'm missing in the count some other studies that he showed a few more biopsies. And he really proved once more that there is a discrepancy, or there can be a discrepancy between kidney and pancreas biopsies up to 1/3 of the pairs. And prediction can improve if we use the pancreas dysfunction in the equation. But anyway, it is important to recognize the discrepancy and try to avoid misdiagnosis, always thinking that the kidney can be the sentinel organ. We have to be a little bit more targeted to rule out rejection in the pancreas. The pathologist of this institute works with Pablo is Maria Fernanda Toniolo, and she presented a good overview of the transition between acute and chronic rejection. And the last part of her presentation, she showed this picture that really highlights a situation where we have both an obvious chronic process where you see the fibrosis and the loss of the pancreas parenchyma, but we also see significant amounts of inflammation remaining in the remaining of the lobules. So it's truly, we have to define better the features of chronic active rejection in the pancreas, and I think we have enough to define both the chronic active T-cell mediated rejection and the chronic active antibody mediated rejection with the work we have done in previous years and accumulating experience from various centers. The last part of the session was dealt with islet dysfunction after beta cell replacement, and this means that the patient is transplanted and doesn't manage to get off insulin completely. So it's a form of failure of the transplant. And the reason why we chose this topic is because there is very little known about islet morphology, pathology in the context of endocrine dysfunction overall, and particularly when patients have delayed graft function. So we were lucky to have Dr. Kandaswamy, one of the top experts in pancreas transplantation worldwide, that he gave us a very nice overview of his experience and literature's review of delayed graft function after pancreas transplantation. So this is delayed endocrine graft function. And he emphasized the lack of standard definition. He said that up to 1/3 of patients have this, so it is something important to understand. Usually resolves, but there are patients that never get off insulin and need to be understood better. There are some risk factors like donor age and obese recipients, but something very fulfilling is that even he told us that we need to do anatomic or histological studies on this because nothing is known. There is nothing in the literature really regarding islet morphology and correlation with dysfunction. So John Papadimitriou from the University of Maryland presented a small study, only 2 patients with protracted dysfunction more than 2 months after transplantation, and showed that doing electron microscopy you can show, this is with the images with enhancement with the J software, and you can see that in the patient, one of the patients with DGF, the beta cells are really lacking significant amount of granules, in contrast to the controls, where when he looked at the density of granules per square micron, there was a statistically significant difference between these 2 situations. So this is the beginning of the studies that have to be done. Then we had a very nice lecture about the islet cell studies on drug interactions, and this was presented by Esteban Porrini from Tenerife in University La Laguna. And he really took us on a tour of all what is known about tacrolimus toxicity and clarifying mechanisms of this toxicity and relationship with post-transplant diabetes mellitus. That, you know, it's a very common and vexing issue in transplantation. And he explained the relationship with the metabolic syndrome, glucolipotoxicity, and the conclusion after his studies and other group studies is that the mechanisms of beta cell damage in diabetes and post-transplant diabetes overall are similar. There is an issue of de-differentiation of the beta cells that, interestingly, can be reversed. And that is one of the most exciting things, I think. And tacrolimus and glucolipotoxicity are synergistic and likely share similar pathways of damage. The last presentation was also regarding islet issues, and Brad Ferris from Emory presented a series of studies that he has participated dealing with immediate inflammatory reactions after islet transplantation. And this was also extremely enlightening, and it is very important to share the knowledge of islet transplantation with whole transplantation regarding islet issues, because they are shared. The virtues and the problems of these, the islets in both settings are to a large extent common. So this is something that needs to be expanded. So in summary, what are we going to do with what we have done up to now and the things we have learned? Daniel Hollanda will continue and finalizing the working guidelines, the Banff working guidelines for the diagnosis of pancreas duodenal rejection. We will, as a group, continue and try to concretize the definitions of chronic active TCMR and AMR. And we have a working group to collect samples for morphological studies with EGF, and we already got the commitment by Dr. Kandaswamy that he wants to participate, and he pledges to provide samples from Dr. Uva, and we will, from our center, and so we will continue trying to advance this part of that is really something new, and we have tremendous need for that. So that's all what we did. Thank you.